Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I've got a really great presentation that I'm going to share with you. It is Ray Mcgovern, who's one of the foremost Russia experts in the world, along with Bill Binney. Bill Binney was the technical director. Now, think about NSA and its technical capabilities, its advanced technical capabilities. Bill Binney was, in fact, the technical director of NSA, and they're going to take apart the Russiagate operation, intelligence operation, from their perspective. I think it's fantastic. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. And here's the thing, I do a lot of presentations, but when I find something that's truly outstanding, I ask for permission. I've asked for permission from Consortium News. In the interest of transparency, I am on the board of directors for Consortium News, but I talked with Joe Loria. They did a great YouTube show the other day, and he's given me permission, with credit, of course, to share the work that they're doing, and it is fantastic. Ray Mcgovern, has done incredible work on Russiagate, but the addition of Bill Binney, former technical director, there's a documentary about him. I think it's called A Good American. The man is just a technical and mathematical genius on a very high level. And they take apart things of Russiagate that I had no idea. He explains technically why the DNC hack makes no sense. He debunks a lot of stuff. And I mean, again, this guy was a technical director of the National Security Agency. He really knows his stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to get to this video, and I suggest you watch it. I suggest you share it with your friends. It's called Russiagate Decomposed. Let's go.
Get out your notebook.
Welcome to CN Live, Season 7, Episode 5, Russiagate Decomposed. I'm Joe Loria, the editor-in-chief of Consortium News.
And I'm Elizabeth Voss.
The phony scandal of Russiagate was already dead. Now it is decomposed. It was killed off by the Mueller report, finding no conspiracy between Russia and the Donald Trump campaign, by the CrowdStrike president's testimony that there was no evidence of a hack of the Democratic National Committee servers, and by the revelation that the entire story, or most of it anyway, was based on made-up opposition research paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign, which was deceptively treated as serious intelligence by senior Obama administration officials and by the Democratic-aligned media. New revelations this month from Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, shows that President Barack Obama and his senior intelligence officials intentionally suppressed dissenting intelligence assessments that Russia did not interfere in the 2016 election. The first of these new revelations came on July 3rd, when Maria Devine of the New York Post broke the story of a report by CIA director, the current CIA director, John Ratcliffe, which exposed how Obama-era director John Brennan went about putting together the infamous intelligence community assessment of January 2017. That assessment said Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, was personally involved in the decision to interfere in the 2016 U.S. election. That Putin sought to, quote, undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability while having a, quote, clear preference for President-elect Trump. It became the central document, this ICA, in the Russiagate myth around which the media frenzy fed. It was already known that Brennan had handpicked the analysts from just the FBI, CIA, and National Security Agency out of the 17 agencies to write this assessment. But Devine added crucial new details, especially that Brennan pushed the inclusion of the Clinton campaign-financed opposition research as if it was serious intelligence. The New York Post said Brennan sidelined the National Intelligence Council and forced the inclusion of the discredited Steele dossier despite objections of the authors and senior CIA Russia experts as to push a false narrative that Russia secured Trump's 2016 victory. Quote, this was Obama, Comey, Clapper, and Brennan deciding, quote, we're going to screw Trump, said Ratcliffe in an exclusive interview with the New York Post. It was, he said, we're going to create this and put out the imprimatur of an IC assessment in a way that nobody can question it. Ratcliffe's report includes emails from CIA officers urging Brennan not to rely on the Steele opposition research document. The focus of this new intelligence is on several things, mostly perhaps on this intelligence community assessment that was decided on in a meeting on December 9 at the White House, which all the principals of the main intelligence agencies, headed by the National Security Director at the time, Susan Rice. This is where the decision was made to write this ICA and to override all of this dissenting intelligence from CIA, mostly CIA Russia analysts. They pushed the Steele warning. Includes these analysts were two CIA senior officers, one from Russia operations, one from Russia analysis. They argued with the director, Brennan, that the dossier should not be included at all in this assessment because it failed to meet basic tradecraft standards. This is according to a senior officer present at the meeting on December 9th. Then there is a House report that came out just this Wednesday, 2 days ago, which says, there's a 46-page report, that this idea that Putin personally was involved came from a single source, a Russian source based here in Northern Virginia, in which he says that Putin favored Trump. And this is, of course, contradicted by these other analysts who dissented, saying that there was no clear indication that Putin wanted Trump to win. In fact, he did not trust Trump. There's other information. The National Security Agency said it had room for alternative judgment to what the ICA came up with. The FBI sought a cover from the CIA on the Steele dossier. Comey did not want to use the Steele dossier and got Brennan to give cover so that the FBI could use it. Their assessment early on, apparently, FBI was that it could not be trusted, the Steele dossier. Brennan gave conclusion that only the CIA, that the document, the ICA, was based on raw human intelligence that talked about Russia aspiring for Trump to win. This word aspire is important. And that turned out to be this Northern Virginia source. There's a lot of revelations here about Hillary Clinton as well, which also shows that Russia could have done a lot more damage than they did. Documents released by Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, shows that during the election there was information that was not leaked by Russia that was far more damaging to Secretary Clinton than the ones that were leaked through WikiLeaks. For example, about Clinton's health. This is from the CIA document. This is from the document of Tulsi Gabbard. The SVR, which is Russia's foreign intelligence, possessed DNC communications that Clinton was suffering from intensified psycho-emotional problems, including uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness. Clinton was placed on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers, and while afraid of losing, she remained obsessed with the thirst for power. She had type 2 diabetes, she had heart disease, deep vein thrombosis, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So she was not well, obviously. Quote from the document of Tulsi Gabbard, the SVR possessed a campaign email. The Russians had a campaign email discussing a plan approved by Secretary Clinton to link Putin and Russian hackers to candidate Trump in order to, quote, distract the public from Clinton email server scandal.
Whoa.
This leads us to the hacking issue, which is not dealt with very extensively by Tulsi Gabbard. And we have here the experts on that, particularly Bill Binney of the NSA, formerly of the National Technical Director of the NSA. But what she does write is that the Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence at the time, Obama's, suppressed intelligence findings that states with confidence that Russia government directed the DNC hacks. Their statements, quote, Tulsi says, omitted the fact that the FBI and NSA had low confidence in attributing the data leaks from these entities to Russia. But then she has a curious statement here that we need to discuss. Tulsi writes, there is still supporting evidence indicating the Russian government directed hacking of the DNC and the DCC. Tulsi writes about also Barack Obama. This became a big part of the story. These revelations rolled out since July 3rd, actually, all this month. What Tulsi writes about Obama is that Donald Trump's Justice Department is opening a criminal investigation into, first of all, into two of Obama's top deputies, John Brennan and James Comey. And Tulsi called also for Obama to be investigated, and that a special prosecutor could be appointed. This has been sent to the Department of Justice. Tulsi wrote that she believes Obama was involved in a, quote, treasonous conspiracy committed by officials at the highest level of our government, announcing that everyone involved, quote, everyone involved must be investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
And on July 18th, this year, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard also revealed overwhelming evidence that after President Trump won the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton, Obama and his national security cabinet did manufacture and politicize intelligence to lay the groundwork for what was essentially a years-long coup against President Trump. After months of investigation into this matter, the facts reveal this new assessment was based on information that was known by those involved to be manufactured, like the Steele dossier, or deemed as not credible. And this was politicized intelligence that was used as the basis for countless smears seeking to delegitimize President Trump's victory. Tulsi said, quote, the issue I am raising is not a partisan issue. It is one that concerns every American. The information we are releasing today clearly shows there was a treasonous conspiracy in 2016 committed by officials at the highest level of our government. Their goal was to subvert the will of the American people and enact what was essentially a years-long coup with the objective of trying to usurp the president from fulfilling the mandate bestowed upon him by the American people. She continued saying, quote, their egregious abuse of power and blatant rejection of our Constitution threatens the very foundation and integrity of our democratic republic. No matter how powerful, every person involved in this conspiracy must be investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. The American people's faith and trust in our democratic republic, and therefore the future of our nation, depends on it. As such, I'm providing all documents to the Department of Justice to deliver the accountability that President Trump, his family, and the American people deserve.
And that is really the overbroad, overreaching importance and significance of this story, what Gabbard said right there. Nonetheless, the Democratic media, Democratic establishment is dismissing all of this as complete nonsense, and nothing seems to be able to change their mind. But we're going to discuss all of this with two excellent guests who were pioneers in debunking this story way back, starting from 2016, 2017, along with the founder of our website and our publication of Consortium News, Bob Perry, Aaron Mate, who picked up the ball and did a lot of great work, and others cited Bob's work on this. But instrumental also was Ray's work and Bill Binney with VIPS, his work that they're going to discuss today. So thank you, gentlemen, Ray and Bill, for joining us here. Let me start with you, Ray. Just give me first of all, your overall assessment. There's a hell of a lot to discuss here. There's so many different threads, but let's just start with an overview of what you think the significance of these revelations this month are.
Thanks, Joe. I agree with you. We should not get into the weeds, and I think your introductory remarks provide all the weeds that we need. This is really a liminal event. Tulsi Gabbard has taken on the deep state. She's thrown down the gauntlet. And now she herself has to run the gauntlet, so to speak, between the media, who is deeply involved in all this, and the deep state, and of course, the Democrats who are left to insist that they were right all along. The key is the media. Now, as you know, it was only Bob Perry and then yourself, Joe, who picked up and were just very courageous in pursuing what we thought was the evidence. Very early on, and Bill can talk to this explicitly, we smelled a rat from the start, long before Trump was even running, even before he was elected. And when we heard these charges about Russian hacking, which came in the fall, like September, October, even after the DNC convention in July and August, we couldn't believe this business because we knew that if there were Russian hacking, NSA would know about it. And so we got together our VIPS NSA alumni, so to speak, Bill Binney and Ed Loomis, both of whom had been technical directors at NSA, and Kurt Wiebe, who was a very, very accomplished senior analyst. And we said, hey, you guys, can you lay out in layman's terms what's going on here? You know, was there a hack? Was there a leak? What's the difference? And I'll let Bill talk about that because he was the principal drafter of December 12th. Now, but get this, December 12th, 2016. All right. Okay. That's before Trump even took office. Right. And Bill took up the cudgel and we all put it in really good shape. We made it so simple that the layman could understand, and no layman and no Pulitzer Prize and no journalist wanted to understand, not even the good ones like Matt Taibbi. Yeah, I couldn't get him to read what Bill had done. So the Trump derangement syndrome was so potent that even the laws of physics could be suspended. And I'll let Bill expatiate on the laws of physics.
Well, I mean, since I basically designed the system that they're currently using to collect all the data in the world, I knew exactly how it worked. And so when it came to this ICA, I read that and I said, this is obviously based on absolutely nothing. So it was a pure opinion based, it was a conspiracy theory promulgated by the media, the DNC, and the deep state. It was obvious to me because from the technology involved and the understanding of the technology in existence and running even, before that, from 2001 on, I mean, I knew this could not be possible when NSA didn't say we have absolute concrete evidence that they did it and it pointed to a building in Russia or wherever it was that they hacked from. I knew they had absolutely nothing. And so that told me right away that it was simply a false narrative. It was a fabricated agenda that they were pushing, trying to divert attention again from the DNC emails being published by WikiLeaks. So, we went through various iterations of looking at the data, first looking at the transfer speeds, because when you got to look at it, and there's two batches of data we're talking about. One came from Guccifer 2 in 2 batches, and another one came from WikiLeaks publications, 3 batches of DNC emails and 1 of Podesta. Those are separate events. When you looked at at the Guccifer 2 data that he conveniently put on the web, so we went and looked at it and just looked at the 2 data sets that he had. The first thing that came out that was very suspicious was the speeds that he was doing. Because everything was timestamped to the millisecond, you could calculate the transfer rates of the different sets of files. And you knew the numbers of characters, the time difference, so you could it's a simple calculation. So we ended up getting things between 19 and 40 49.2 megabytes per second. Now that's not possible. So other people said, well, it could be, and they could still do that. And I said, okay, we'll try it. So we tried it across the web, going from the US to Europe. A fellow guy came in and coordinated and helped us along. He set it up. He set up a file and tried to transfer it even between data centers in New Jersey and England. And the fastest we could get was 1/4 that maximum speed, which was still even less than the lowest speed of transfer. So we said, obviously, all these transfer rates fit with a thumb drive download. Sorry, they don't go for a transfer. And that's consistent with Sean Henry's testimony. We couldn't see any transfer. That's why it didn't go across the web. So, and the speeds told us that.
Sean Henry, by the way, is the president of CrowdStrike, who testified behind
Yeah.
closed doors. I want Ray to talk a little bit about that later, who said that there was no evidence of exfiltration from
Sean
the
Henry,
DNC.
yeah.
That has never been reported by the mainstream media. Go on, Bill.
Well, but more importantly, when you looked at the two data files that Lucifer 2 put out and sorted them by millisecond, they merged into one continuous file without conflict. That told you right away that the guy was playing with the data. He did one download and then split it into two and claimed he had two hacks and two attacks, when in fact it was one. So he's playing with the data.
Who is he? Who's playing?
Okay. He also posted, this is where it came into the evidence. He posted on the 15th of June, I think it was, files showing Russian fingerprints inside of DNC data on 15 June, I think it was. But he put those 5 items out, and we had guys participating with us in the research in England. They looked at those 5. They were Podesta emails, and they were published later on on the 21st of September posted by WikiLeaks. And they found 5 of them that had the fingerprints that Gooster 2 said, but in WikiLeaks posted, they didn't have them. So that meant they were added. So that meant somebody's playing with the data. And if you looked at the Vault 7 stuff, the release in Vault 7 out of CIA, they have a program called Marble Framework that I think Ray has talked about before. And it very simply says, here's how you disguise an attack. You can make it look like the Russians did it, the Chinese, the North Koreans, Arabs, or the Farsis, the Iranians. So that, to me, and I think in the Vault 7 material somewhere, they said it was used once in 2016. So I think we found it there. 2016, 15th of May.
What happened in 2016?
And guess who that points the whole evidence back to? CIA is the originator of Lucifer 2 and a participant in the false narrative that was being pushed.
That's quite funny, because I interrupted you to ask you who he was, and Elizabeth just and I said, was it Brennan? And Elizabeth sent me a text saying, no, Lucifer 2, but it was Brennan. Lucifer 2, you think was Brennan, right?
It gets back to Brennan headed CIA, so it's pointing back at him as the originator of Lucifer 2.
Well, Brennan shows up in this month's revelations as the main culprit. And I remember you telling us, Bill, on one of our many earlier webcasts on this topic, that Brennan was the guy and he was the mastermind of this.
Yeah. And further, can I add one more thing here?
Yes,
when
of
I was
course.
talking to Pompeo at CIA, when he was at CIA, and President Trump said he needed to talk to me.
Yeah.
At the end, he asked me, who do you think is behind all of this? And I said, there's only one person that can be, in my view, and that's Obama, because all of the participating agencies only come to one point. They converge to one and only one point, and that's the president.
Right. And he's in the crosshairs as well now, right?
Well, that was the Lucifer 2 data. Okay, those files are gone. It's creation of CIA, most likely, by the evidence. Now we're left with the Podesta emails and the DNC emails by WikiLeaks. So when we looked at the WikiLeaks data, the 3 different files, 35,813 emails. Okay, each and every one of them had an ending last modified time in an even second. That meant to the technologist that's the fat file transfer format when you transfer data down to a thumb drive from a computer. And that file, that transfer, the fat file format does that modification. So there's one chance in 35,813 to the second power I mean, 2 to the 35,813 power. One chance of it being wrong, that it was done locally. So I'll take everything but one chance, and everybody, all the mainstream media who's pushing the narrative of this conspiracy crap, they're the ones pushing conspiracy. I mean, even Jim Risen called me a conspiracy theorist. When I talked to him, he just didn't understand. He was not technology. He was not smart technology. He didn't understand anything. He didn't even go ask anybody else. I mean,
You're far too, Bill. You're far too charitable. Risen knew what he was doing. He did it to keep his job.
Yes, and that's what Patrick Lawrence didn't do. He wouldn't compromise his integrity.
You got
He
it.
lost his job.
Right.
And because of that, Jim went along with the conspiracy and, continued. I mean, it shows a weakness, character weakness. That's all.
Patrick Lawrence, of course, is a columnist for Conservative News, and at the time he reported on all this that Bill is talking about for The Nation magazine, and he lost his job because of it, basically. They got two sides of this story. Now, Ray, it's Tulsi's documents, as much as there's so much to talk about and incredibly important revelations that confirm so much, she's very weak on the hacking issue, which we're discussing right now. She says still at Russia. Yes, Ray. I want you to talk about that.
I will, but I want to pick up on just to put a coda on what Bill has been saying. Now, I've learned a lot about math, but it took Bill about 5 times to explain all this to me. Okay. And so we have this group called Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And part of our job is when we have the kind of expertise that existed at the top levels of NSA, technical directors, 2 of them, for God's sake, we have to make a special effort to put things in terms that laymen can understand in the hopes that laymen will get it. So I just want to quote from this December 12th, 2016 memo, because it not only included all the experience that these people had who constructed the networks, for God's sake, but it was able to profit from Ed Snowden's charts that he brought out to Hong Kong 2 years before, with all the trace routes and everything like that. And not least the principles of physics. Now, Bill explained it in technical terms, but the principle of physics don't let things to be downloaded. Well, I go into that, but here's just a little thing that we thought was necessary. Here's quoting from the primary draft that Bill did. We have gone through the various claims about hacking. Now, this is December 2016. For us, it is child's play to dismiss them. The email disclosures and questions are the result of a leak, not a hack. Here's the difference between leaking and hacking. Leak: when someone physically takes the data out of a organization and gives it to some other person or organization, as Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning did. Hack: when someone in a remote location electronically penetrates operating systems, firewalls, or other cyber protection systems, and then extracts the data. Now, the important thing is that we have sworn testimony now from the head of CrowdStrike that there was no physical indication, no technical data showing that those emails from the DNC were hacked. In other words, they were not exfiltrated. They were not put in the ether or on the internet. They were put on an external storage device into a physical computer, not downloaded, but copied, for God's sake. And the speed with which they were copied matched exactly the speed that this thumb drive could tolerate. So I just want to go back and say that in December of 16, this was already evident to us, and the rest was just mopping up and trying to refute all these spurious charges in the possession of more evidence, like this so-called Lucifer 2.0 and all that kind of stuff. So just want to set that straight. Now, Joe, could you repeat your question? Because it's a really important one.
It follows exactly what you're saying.
Can I add something here?
Yes, please, Bill.
When Sean Henry testified in Congress, when he said he was not exfiltrated, nobody there asked him the further questions, which they should have done. Did you look to see if anybody downloaded that data internally in the network? And you can get that right off the network log. The instructions are right there in the network log. Copy, whatever, copy over here. Well, it's in the network log. So they could have picked that out and said, no, it was downloaded locally. But they didn't. Why? Because it doesn't fit that narrative. And nobody was smart enough in the intelligence community, on their staff or anywhere else, to ask anybody that question. They should have, but they didn't.
Well, they
Seems
might
to
have
me
found a very damning answer, right, Bill? They might have found
Exactly.
which person and which computer in the DNC copied that stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that Sean Henry said, Bill, you'll recall, is that we had emails that were prepared for exfiltration, but they weren't exfiltrated.
And
Now, you explain that, Bill.
my point to that was that when the fat file runs through, it changes the last modified time, probably in the computer too. And so therefore, when he looked at it, he saw all the even times. He said, oh, somebody used a fat file to transfer it locally, not internationally or anywhere else outside the network. That's why I think he was helping to cover that up. I don't know. But I would have asked that question. I mean, I've used network logs to find out all kinds of things, who's doing what in my network, how long they stay, what they looked at, what they did. I mean, every instruction people need to understand, the network log contains every instruction that's ever sent down the lines on the network. It's all there, and you can resort and see exactly who's doing what, when they're doing it, and how much data they did, whatever, can see everything.
Okay, Bill, a not so innocent question. Why is it that these logs are not implemented across the board? Is there some kind of nefarious reason why people don't want to know what's going on?
Yes, exactly. There is, Ray. And I proposed this internally for NSA in 1992. What is that? What is that? 33 years ago or something like that. And I had to go up through the staff of the agency because I was proposing to do network logs around the world, every network log that NSA had, on every field site and everything, and do them all simultaneously, know who's doing what everywhere. And if they'd implemented that, Snowden couldn't have done what he did without getting discovered right as he was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I proposed that, the senior guy on the agency staff says to me, you mean to tell me Congress can come in here then and look at all the programs we're running and see which ones are succeeding, which are failing, how we're moving money around and all that kind of stuff? And I said, sure, they could do that. He says, you are never going to do this program. And that's exactly what he said to me. So that tells you they just don't want anybody looking at what they're doing. If that's the intelligence community, that's a setup for corruption, and that's what we've got.
Just a little codicil here on Sean Henry's testimony. Adam Schiff was about to take over the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence with the change in administrations, okay? We're talking December 2017. By some miracle, the Democrats got one more hearing and forced Sean Henry to testify. He testified, as we'd already explained. There was no evidence of a hack. Okay, now what happened? Adam Schiff, who took over a month later, put that testimony in the bottom of his safe and kept it there for 2.5 years. 2.5 years, okay? Then finally somebody said to then President Trump, hey, you're the president. You could get that released if you want. And the president said, okay, well, have it released. So one of his people called Schiff and said, look, if you don't release that testimony from Sean Henry tomorrow, we're going to release it because we can release it. And Adam Schiff released it. What was that date? Oh, that was May 7th, 2020. 2.5 years after the testimony. Oh, well, great, it's released. Well, they released it with 58 different things that didn't meet it on a Friday night. And guess what? The mainstream media missed it. Nobody reported. So you have from December 5, the testimony, December 5, 2017, until today, what is it, July 25th, 2025, the American people have no way of knowing that the technical evidence shows it could not have been a hack, that things were indeed assembled for exfiltration, but I think we know that they were not exfiltrated, they were copied and onto this thumb drive. And the evidence was just so clear, and it was so frustrating for us. I mean, it was frustrating for me, but I can imagine how it must have been for these former NSA technical directors. We get them on the record, and nobody will listen, not even the most progressive people. And I mentioned Matt Taibbi because he's the best. Okay, so the fact that I couldn't get Matt Taibbi to call Bill Binney and get the real story is just a matter of Trump derangement syndrome, so thick that a really good guy, and he's doing great reporting again, Matt, would not do it. It's just too dangerous. It just so beyond the pale. And you have James Risen, for God's sake, calling Bill Binney conspiracy theorist. I think I sent you that clip. It speaks volumes. So it's it was frustrating, and now I mean it's like all home week here with Bill and I on together for the first time in at least a decade, right, Bill?
Yeah, but I mean the real kicker though is even when Sean Henry was testifying, nobody was smart enough in the committee or in the staff of the committee to ask the question that, well, did you look to see if anybody copied them in the network log? Because I guess they don't understand what a network log is, or that there even exists.
Well, they didn't want it. They were going through the motions. What was it? Nunes. Nunes was the guy who they moved aside, okay? And he insisted that Conaway, who is his next guy on the committee, hold this hearing. Conaway was yawning and not paying much attention, and the questions were inane. In other words, they were going through the motions, but they got Sean Henry. They asked him the question. Well, Adam Schiff asked him the question. He says, "Now, tell me, Mr. Henry, how was it that the Russians hacked into those DNC emails?" And Henry goes, "Well," and his lawyer pulled him aside.
Don't lie. Don't lie.
And then Henry said, "Oh, well, actually, we have no technical evidence that there was anything exfiltrated or hacked. So, hello, I mean, and we couldn't sell that. We couldn't tell the people about that. And Adam Schiff was allowed to hide that for 2.5 years, and the rest of the MSN has hidden it since May 7th, 2020, when it was released. My God, no wonder Ray, people are so brainwashed." Yeah, Bill.
But also, Ray, that's why the DNC never released the server to the FBI to investigate, because they didn't want them looking at who internally downloaded and copied those files. That would destroy the running narrative of the Democrats, the deep state, and all this conspiracy to do a coup, which I claim I called it a coup back in 2017 in Vancouver when I gave a talk at the law school up there. And, it was an obvious coup.
I remember that, Bill, but you were a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I know. I only make a judgment based on fact, Ray. I don't care about, opinion.
I know.
Opinions are like body parts, everybody's got them,
I think it's worth mentioning that Sean Henry, of course, president of CrowdStrike, it was a Democratic National Committee that hired CrowdStrike to investigate how these emails wound up with WikiLeaks. And they did not allow the FBI to look at the servers. They hired a private company. So the Democratic committee and the Clinton campaign paid for the investigation into the email leak, and they paid for the Steele dossier, which was opposition research, which wound up becoming really the basis of this ICA, which fed this entire madness for the last so many years, and the Democrats still won't give up. So, Ray, yes, what I wanted to ask is, but you can go on with your point.
Yeah,
I think, Bill, you need to somehow talk to Tulsi Gabbard, because you got to see Pompeo. You got to get Trump to set up a meeting with Tulsi, because she doesn't understand this at all, because she has in her report that there's some evidence that the Russians hacked the DNC.
Well, not from CrowdStrike and not from anybody who's looked at the network log if they said anything like that. If they did, they should be able to say, here's the date, here's the specific time in that date, and here's the downloads that they did, or the hacking transfer.
Schiff himself was brainwashed, Ray, as you point out. He expected him to give an answer. This is how the Russians did it. He didn't know he was going to say there was no evidence. We better bury this damn document, which was, of course, in-camera testimony, and they kept it secret until it was released.
Can I give a little explanation here? When any transfer of information, a file or an email or whatever, goes across the network, gets busted up into packet. Now, each packet has to have the IP, the internet protocol for the originating and for the ending terminals getting that packet. So in other words, if you capture one packet, you know it's where it's coming from and where it's going to in the world. And that's a worldwide network. IPv4 and IPv6 is a network that covers the entire world. And it lays out everybody here and there on all their devices. So just capturing one packet would tell you who's doing it. And NSA didn't even have one packet out of, thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, it's crazy. That's why it was impossible for me to believe anything that they were saying back in 2016.
Here's
Go ahead, Ray.
Joe. Just to pick up on that, here's John McCain at the time saying this was a declaration of war, the Russian hacking, okay? And Jim Comey, the head of the FBI at the time, says, but they won't let me send my forensic experts into the DNC. They won't let me. The head of the FBI. So he defers to CrowdStrike. Now, what's CrowdStrike? CrowdStrike is a construct of the old FBI guy who was the technical director for what's his name? The special counsel, Comey's predecessor, Robert Mueller, okay?
Mueller.
So Mueller and the FBI set this guy up with a new firm called CrowdStrike. And the thing they did contemporaneously with when they were picked to do this very vital job, they detected Russian interference with Ukrainian artillery, okay? The Russians had hacked into Ukrainian artillery to make it inaccurate, okay? Oops, it found out, the world found out. But no, it was a defect in the manufacture of the Ukrainian artillery, and CrowdStrike had to recall its very cute analysis, okay? It was at this precise time that CrowdStrike is hired by James Comey. They won't let me do the forensics, so would you please do? I mean, it was a put-up job for the beginning. Sean Henry as part of the gang, and you're right, Joe. That's why I say Devin Nunes. He only had a little residual power because they aced him out of the thing. But he insisted that this last House Intelligence Committee meeting take place with Sean Henry under oath, okay? I told you the other guys didn't give a rat's patootie, okay? But they asked him this question, and Schiff didn't know enough to not make himself look stupid by asking him that first question. Tell me, how do the Russians hack you to get the answer? Well, actually, they didn't.
Can I add another thing here?
Yeah.
Let me add another thing that's relevant even today. When they want to find out all the deep state inside the government, all the different agencies, if you analyze the network logs in all those agencies, you could lay out the entire network of criminality that's been going on all along, including all the fraud, all the money transfers, everything. You could lay it out by analyzing those logs. But do you think anybody does that? No, because they don't want to know. Let's keep the ball rolling so the money keeps flowing.
just want to correct one thing. Ray said it wasn't Comey that hired CrowdStrike. It was the Clinton campaign that hired
Yeah, the Clinton
CrowdStrike.
campaign, yeah.
But there's one thing I
Well-
think Tulsi is confusing to, yes?
No,
So-
I'm just saying. The point is that Comey deferred to all that.
Yeah.
I mean, it
No,
was
he did.
his job to look at the damn thing, and
Yeah.
the Clinton people. And then Comey said, "Oh, okay." So you
Yeah,
show the Clinton people, Comey, and deep state, and the media all in this pernicious kind of conspiracy. Hate the word, use the word, but that's what we have here. And Tulsi is right. And just to add the most important point. She's thrown down the gauntlet. She's skating on thin ice. She's going to need all the support she can get. And the fact that we contemporaneously had all these, I just hope that someone on her staff is aware of the good work we did starting in December of 2016.
She needs to understand this hacking thing, because that is really a big problem with the report. She even confuses, I think, hacking into electoral infrastructure, the election machines. That they admitted that hadn't happened. Obama even admitted that. So she's using that as to say, well, then why are they saying that they hacked the DNC? These are two separate issues. But she does state that there's some evidence that Russia hacked the DNC. This is what I think she needs to be illuminated on by you guys, because that is a really bad part of this report. Yes, Ray.
Yeah, Joe, I think there may be two not exclusive interpretations there. She is not above doing a limited modified hangout, to use the John Ehrlichman thing from the Nixon days. It's a really, really neuralgic issue. If there was no hacking, if it was somebody within the DNC or with access to who would, are there any likely suspects? Oh, one guy was murdered just 3 weeks later. Okay, so we won't go into that right now. But all I'm saying is that's one alternative explanation. The other is just confusion. I mean, they may not have read Bill's piece on December 12th, 2016, and the Russians may have hacked into the DNC. In my view, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about two specific hacks at the end of May when they got this data, not hacks, but downloads or copies onto. We know the dates that was done, okay? And so there were probably other Russian attempts to hack the DNC. I don't know. Bill, you can speak to that. That might be an alternative explanation as to why Tulsi is confused.
Well, that may be, but I don't know of any evidence that that's true.
Okay.
And where is NSA on this? NSA is the authority on that, because I left them the ability to know about the entire network worldwide. Where the hell are they?
I'll tell you where the NSA was. They had low to moderate, they had no confidence really in this ICA, right? Because they didn't have the data, they didn't have the evidence, correct?
That meant it didn't happen. So if the Russians ever hacked into the DNC, where is the evidence from NSA? They have.
NSA would have had high confidence because they would have had the evidence. They didn't have the evidence.
It would say, this is it.
Exactly.
And SVR having this information about Hillary Clinton's health and her statement that we're doing this as a distraction from the server issue, which could be that server or the other one up in Westchester County. I'm not sure about that. So how did the SVR get this? They could be human intelligence too, or there could be phone tapping. It doesn't necessarily mean it came from this. There was no hack of the DNC server, correct? This is what we've established, but it's not established in this report. What is established is there, and Ray, if you could express from your experience at the CIA, how often does it happen that lower level, and I don't mean junior, but people just below senior leaders at the CIA, dissented strong, do not say this. This is not true. How often is that ignored? I mean, this is really the crux of what Tulsi has uncovered here, is that Brennan decided to ignore that dissension, and even they only had one planning meeting, we have found out. The ICA had one coordination meeting, the hand-picked analysts from only 3 agencies. And before that meeting began, Brennan sent out a message saying it was the Russians. Forget it. So in other words, he put the pressure on them. There's no discussion. And there really wasn't any discussion here. So how often could that have happened at the CIA, in your experience? That the dissenters were
happened.
completely ignored.
Joe, the raison d'etre of veteran intelligence professionals for sanity is because it happened before Iraq. The whole system was corrupted by middle management and top management levels. Cheney came in and said, "You will find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and you will establish that there were ties between Saddam Hussein and Al Qaeda, sotto voce." So Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11, and it was just awful. All our former colleagues fell in line and produced the worst estimate ever on October 1st, 2002, okay, which I call the whore of Babylon, because it said all these things. So it happened before. Now, what's the key here? No one was held accountable. The four principal national intelligence officers that guided that thing got bonuses, cash bonuses, and promotions, okay? So what's to prevent it from happening again? What surprises me is that there were still enough honest, ethical people to fight against Brennan and say, no, we don't agree, no, this is not this, but up to when Brennan finally said, no, this is what it's got to be. Why in God's name did no one have the courage to blow the whistle, to whistleblow, to go to somebody at great risk and say, look, this is what we're being required to do. It's a phony. It's really beyond the pale. What else? Well, I guess that's it for that particular thing. I would like to talk just a little about Obama's involvement itself, but Joe, you're asking the questions. We could come to that when you wish.
I was going to turn it over to Elizabeth now.
Good.
Yeah, no, Ray, go right ahead. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, on Obama's role.
Well, this is kind of such a sensitive thing that I went back and I kind of saw what I wrote about 3 years ago about this. The evidence accumulated. In other words, yeah, we got it right in December 2016, but there's lots more coming out, okay? FBI emails made public in connection with the trial of Michael Sussman, one of those lawyers who lied, okay, and got exonerated by a DC jury. He said that, look, emails made public in connection with that trial show that President Barack Obama was actively encouraging his top security officials to do a number on the Russiagate as early as October 2016. The newly available emails show FBI show that the Bureau was still requesting, that is, the FBI was still requesting the results from CrowdStrike in early October of 2016, and the president intervened and told the two most docile members of his establishment, look, James Comey, he'll do whatever I tell you. Jay Johnson, the FBI and the CIA they don't have any results from CrowdStrike. But Jay Johnson, you're head of the Homeland Security. You two do a memo. Now, what's the significance of this? The memo said the U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails. These steps and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election. What was the date of that? October 7th. 2016. Jay Johnson was very apologetic of that. When he testified before Congress, he said, look, quote, the president approved the statement. I know he wanted to make the statement. So that was very definitely a statement by the United States government, not just me and James Clapper. Now, Johnson's a lawyer, right? He's married to a Catholic. He has said before he's really glad he didn't convert to Catholicism because then he'd have to go to confession for all the people he killed from authorizing drone strikes and stuff like that. So here he is admitting, the president really insisted that we do this, and the whole thing was this. The DNC decided that they would blame Russia for hacking, right? They decided that at the end of July 2016, but they had no evidence. Jennifer Palmieri, the PR person for Hillary Clinton, drove her golf cart around to the outlets and the cable people and said, look, the Russians hacked, and she couldn't get any buyers. Then, according to Jennifer Palmieri, whom I heard at one of the Podesta think tanks, physically, I was there. She said, now, we were really in a bind because nobody would buy this. But then when we got back to Brooklyn, these are exact words. Then people came from the media and from intelligence people and intelligence who have influence in the media, and they started telling us, but we still needed some official thing. And God, finally, we got it. And this is what she said at this meeting, Center for American Progress or something like that. We finally get to the point on October 7th when the administration came out with a very stunning memo. How stunning it was for both the Director of National Intelligence and the Director of Homeland Security to put out a statement, a long statement that said with high confidence that Russia was interfering in the election and that they were also directing the timing of the leaks. And it named the institutions, Guccifer, as being Russian-led, and how stunning that was so that we could be certain and that public. So do I think that the answer for the Democrats now in both the House and the Senate is to talk about it more and make it even more real? Date of this is April 2017. So what we have here is an admission by Hillary's PR person that they made this out of whole cloth, and that not even the FBI or the CIA would buy into this before they got some results from CrowdStrike. They went ahead anyway because Obama insisted on it. And guess what? That set the stage. It was 1 month, I'll remind you, before the election itself. That carried the day. And then Obama later, after the election, commissioned this so-called intelligence community assessment, which is an embarrassment to the trade, which is just really awful. And we said so at the time, didn't we, Bill?
Yes, we did. Yep. Well, for obvious reasons. I mean, it was just clear from the very beginning there was nothing there. They were all just making it up. So, it's just pitiful that the entire media went that way. I mean, you would think somewhere along the line the media would have some integrity. Patrick Lawrence had it, and I didn't see anybody else that did at the time.
Yeah, he got fired, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
He's also been censored from Twitter now, and Elon Musk has never reinstated him. He was censored by old Twitter. The new Twitter doesn't care.
He was reinstated just a few days ago, Patrick.
Are you serious? Well, congratulations, Patrick Lawrence. That's great.
Dead serious. Patrick also was the first in Salon in July during the DNC to say that they were going to blame Russia. He was actually the very first to do that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And in Tulsi's document, she has a timeline. October 7, you were talking about October 2016, that the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, who, by the way, said that the Russians had some kind of genetic disorder to make them lie all the time, that that they suppressed the evidence of the FBI and the NSA, which at that time had low confidence attributing data leaks from the DNC and the DCC to Russia. In other words, the FBI and NSA at that time said it wasn't Russia, but they put out a press release anyway to direct Clapper and DHS that it was Russia that did it. Elizabeth, back.
Can I tell a little story about Clapper?
Yes, please. That's why we're here.
It's coming, Ray.
Your stories.
Go ahead.
While I was at NSA, I had Clapper under a contract for 3 days. So I had him in to do some advice. What I wanted to do was automate. I was, the founder of the Chicken Automation Research Center, the SARC, and part of our business was automate everything as much as we could. So one of the things I wanted to do was work with SAC and do automated BDA, bomb damage assessment, for hits and misses and all that kind of stuff, and assessment automatically without people. And so I got Clapper in, because he used to be the deputy SINC of SAC, I think, at one time. He was an Air Force 3-star anyway, and he had knowledge and influence of people out there. So I said, how can we approach them to do this? And it took me, out of the 3 days, it took me 2.5 days to get him to understand that I wanted to automate the BDA process. 2.5 days. And in the last part of it, he says to me, oh, you want to make real change. This guy's a mental brick. I mean, so it was a waste of money to have him there, basically.
Did you pay him anyway, Bill?
Yeah, well, but you had the contract, we paid him, yeah.
All right. Yeah, may I say another little vignette about Clapper?
Yeah.
Joe, you've already said that Clapper famously said, as National Director of Intelligence, that the Russians were almost genetically inclined to be evil and do terrible things, and almost genetically, okay? Well, he didn't know much about genetics. What he did know was to follow orders. He was put in place by Bobby Gates and the people who are running things as head of the institution under the Defense Department to assess or to analyze satellite photography, infrared, radar, multispectral, you name it. And he was ahead of that thing, okay? And in his book, I mean, this goes back to a Carnegie thing where he's hawking his book, right? So Mcgovern gets there a half hour early, buys the book, $17 wasted, but goes into the John, right? Goes into the men's room, goes through the index. And what does he say about Iraq? And I confronted him. I said, Mr. Comey, you say that with respect to finding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, you, as head of the NEMA, the National Intelligence Geographic, you're head of the Satellite Analysis Group, you said that Dick Cheney was leaning on you so hard that you found 132 suspect WMD sites, but you couldn't find any WMD, and so you write in your book here. So I take some of the personal blame for this, but we ended up finding things that weren't really there. Period. End quote. So I asked him about that. Now, Mr. Clapper, with respect to Russiagate, is this kind of a repeat performance? Have you found in Russian hacking things that weren't really there? And he said, oh, no, I talked to NSA. And I said, we have two former technical directors, and they say that it's bogus. No, I don't know. I said, how about what Obama said 2 days before he left? I said, what do you mean? I said, he said, we don't know how these emails got to WikiLeaks. What about that? Well, I don't know what Obama says now, but we were pretty sure at the time that blah, blah, blah. And then the head of Carnegie, who happened to be a guy named William Burns, later head of the CIA, said, now, Mr. Mcgovern and Mr. Guy, we have to go on to other questions, okay? So that's how bad this guy is. He's so naive that he puts in his book that, sorry, we found things that weren't really there, namely weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They had no evidence before the war. A million people are dead because of that. And he's putting it in his book. And, that was my last chance there to challenge him, but he should be held to account. and dumbheit. I mean, being dumb, or being of the Curtis LeMay school of Russian analysis doesn't exculpate you from committing crimes and having a whole bunch of people dead with respect to Iraq.
Now, I don't think there was any love lost between Obama and Hillary Clinton by 2016. I don't think that they were, very close as people. But so what do you think was the motivation of Obama to really spearhead this conspiracy theory? Was it just to protect the Democratic Party? What are your thoughts?
To me,
John Brennan. The answer is
Yeah,
John Brennan. Okay.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
also the Democratic
even-
Party. I mean, they still have
Yeah.
to protect the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
you know?
it was the Dems and John Brennan,
Right.
because after Trump won, my God, they had done so many illegal things that they had to protect their derrieres, and in the process, try to make it so that Trump couldn't possibly succeed and would have to always fight off these things, investigations, impeachment, and all that kind of stuff. So it was one of those unique things where the Democrats and the media and the deep state were all working together, see? But it was John Brennan who had inordinate influence over Obama. And you should read what Jeremy Kuzmarov says about that, okay? Obama did pretty much whatever Brennan told him to do from the very start before he became president, right after Brennan joined the campaign. I can explain that later. So anyhow, I see it as John Brennan saying, look, we're all on the hook here. We got to cover our tracks, and we've got to pursue this Russiagate thing to the best we can. And Obama says, yeah, okay, I'll commission a study, and you make sure that Clapper and you and the FBI guy Comey, you guys do it all alone, okay? Because we don't want the State Department involved, and we don't want the Defense Department involved. Now, the GRU, the opposite number of our military intelligence, was accused of all this stuff, and the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, has the portfolio for the GRU, and so they were kept out of this thing, because on occasion DIA tells truths that nobody else wants to hear. So it was pretty bad. I've seen it happen before. The fact that now we know for sure just five intelligence analysts, not from the FBI and NSA, but from CIA itself, and we know the name of one of them. His name is Michael Van Langlingham, and we have his picture here somewhere. There he is. Okay, now we know that he is bragging about being the principal drafter of the ICA, but this was July of last year, so it's a year ago. I wonder how he feels about it now. You get naive people. He thought he did a good job, and four others. You put a little cabal, you do it offline. I saw it happen when Casey came in. He wanted to pin the assassination attempt on the Pope on the Russians, okay? He couldn't get Mel Goodman, my good colleague, and others to say that. And so he pointed this little group off to the side. Oh, guess what they came up with? It was the Russians and the Bulgarians that tried to assassinate the Pope. So it's a time-tested technique. You get people who want to get bonuses, who want to move up. This guy, Michael Van Landingham, is a case in point. He probably comes from some of the agency, I would guess, like NSA, or they have these people come in with no experience. And they tell them what to say, and they say it.
Excuse me, Elizabeth, I'll go back to you. I just want to intervene to say, I think Elizabeth was asking an excellent question. Was it Trump that they were so obsessed, afraid of, that they wanted to stop him? Was that the motive for doing this? And also, Ray, you've often pointed out, and I hope you do now, what Comey wrote in his book, that they expected Hillary to win. That's an important part of this. But how much, Bill, was Trump the reason why they did this? Not Brennan may have told Obama to do it, true. But how scared were they?
I would think it's probably about 50-50, maybe 60-40, protect yourself and get Trump to lose the election. Because he came in, he had all the money, he didn't need money, right? He wasn't getting paid. He gave the money to one of the military organizations or something. I can't remember which it was, but he also wasn't a politician, so he didn't have any IOUs out there to the different parties. And that meant he was like what they'd call a loose cannon on deck, right? Able to fire in any direction, and nobody was safe. And so therefore everybody had to try to limit what he did or what he could do. And that was the whole objective. Once he won, they had to limit what he could do. And they did their best to do that. But still, he did better than most presidents, even at that time. Even under those conditions, he succeeded in many ways.
Let me interject here, if I may. On January 2nd, 2017, with Trump waiting to be inaugurated, Chuck Schumer decided that he needed to tell Rachel Maddow something really important. And so he calls up Rachel. I got to come on. So Rachel has him on the show, and Rachel says, now, Chuck, you want to say something important? What was it? And Chuck says, well, I used to think that President-elect Trump was a pretty smart guy, but my God, he has done something very foolish. Oh, what would that be, Chuck? Well, he's taken on the intelligence community, and they have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. Like, oh, wow, Chuck. Now, Rachel goes on to the next question instead of saying, "What do you mean, Chuck?" So the warning was out there, given to Trump even before he got into office. The next thing that happens, 3 days later, on the 5th of January 2017, Trump meets with Comey and Brennan and the NSA guy and Susan Rice and just a couple other people, and they do their little plan for how they're going to get Trump, okay? The ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, so-called, had said that Trump owes his victory to Russian interference, okay? So let's publish that tomorrow, okay? And simultaneously, let's you guys, you three, NSA, Comey, no, Clapper, Comey, and Brennan, go to brief President Trump out of courtesy, And so they meet him in Trump's digs there, and they say, now, Mr. President, this is really awkward, but we need to tell you that just today, we have published this intelligence community assessment, which says the Russians hacked into to help you win the election and make Hillary lose. So that's coming out today. We just want to let you know. And then Comey, by prearrangement with Obama, okay, says, now, gentlemen, would you please leave the room? I have something very, very, very sensitive to say to the president-elect. So they leave. Brennan and Clapper leave. Mr. President, says Comey, Mr. President-elect, and this is, I don't know how to start this, but there's this very scurrilous report about your being with prostitutes in Moscow several years ago, and it's not confirmed, but it's going around. Actually, that too is being published today, and we just, it's really, we just so you know, Mr. President, just so you know. Now, okay, if it were Bill Binney, or if it were I would have said, thank you so much, Director Comey. Please go out and clean out your desk. You're out of here. I don't want to see your face in Washington ever again. Okay. We know this trick. We've been around, This is tried with every new president. Get the hell out of here. Okay. Instead, Comey says, President says, well, thanks for telling me. And he spends the next 2 months trying to win Comey over to his side. because he has great persuasive powers, right? This Trump. Well, give me a break. That was so blatant that unless you were just a real estate magnate from New York, you would understand what was going on there. And that was the keynote. For the rest of the time, they tried to emasculate him and come up with all these theories about Lucifer 2 and everything, of which Bill can give you chapter and verse.
Can I add one other thing just to make sure we don't lose it? You know, when it came to court cases for General Flynn and Roger Stone, I put in sworn affidavits listing all the technical data that refuted the hack, which was the basis for their going after them in the beginning. So that took away the entire case to the government from the very beginning. And the judges wouldn't let me testify. So that, and you're seeing the judges now doing what they're doing, trying to, again, limit what President Trump can do. This corruption goes right into the judiciary. And we need not forget that, because they're a part of this corruption too.
Yeah, and may I add something?
Please do.
Yeah, the lawfare, the judges and the subpoenas and all this. People don't know this widely, but and I think it was 2019, the lawyers, Democratic lawyers for Aaron Rich, Seth Rich's brother, served subpoenas on Ed Loomis.
Me.
What's your name again? Bill Binney.
Yeah. I got one.
Kirk Wiebe. Okay. And they wanted to know all the reasons, what the reasons were that we said that the Russians didn't hack. Okay. Why?
And can I add something here?
Yeah.
And I left one
Yeah.
of the lawyers come up here with somebody and take data right off my computer. And I said, here's
Yep.
the data I used to make that judgment. And they came
Right.
back later
Okay.
on and said, what was the judgment what was the data you used to make the judgment? I said, well, I already gave it to you. That's it.
Okay.
Look at it.
Okay. So
They
not to
couldn't
prolong
understand
this.
They couldn't understand the
Not-
simple as even ending on mark times for the last modified times in the 35,813 emails. They couldn't even understand that. Yeah, great.
Okay, so while all this is going on, Bill and Ed and Kirk are telling me, hey, we got subpoenaed, and I have to admit, I had a little bit of what I might call subpoena envy. Okay,
Yeah.
why weren't they subpoenaing me? I mean, what am I, a piece of, anyhow, then they subpoenaed me. We had just moved down to North Carolina. First thing I know, with some neighbors very curious about this formal subpoena serving on this new neighbor. Okay, we want all the information that you used to say the Russians didn't hack, So, I said, well, you got it from Binney and Loomis and Wiebe. That's it. And I said, no, we need your detailed explanation. So I did a number on them. I said, Aaron Rich and you Democratic lawyers, I'm really, really glad that you're trying to get to the bottom of who killed your brother, Aaron. I really applaud. That's a good example of being your brother's keeper. Because, if we're right and there was no Russian hack, well, there's only one candidate for the person who put that thumb drive into a DNC computer that we know of. And we realize that you'd like to get to the bottom of that. So good luck on that, Aaron. Good luck. I was being facetious, of course. These lawyers, this is lawfare against, this is the first time ever I was subpoenaed. I was sort of gratified that I was as important as Binney, Loomis, and Wiebe, but still, my God. So my neighbors kept asking me, so you work for the CIA, so were you torturing people? Why did they subpoena you? It's just awful, Anyhow, you want to look at my response to that subpoena. It's on my website. It's easily found because the website, raymcgovern.com, is easily searchable.
And I would add to that, Ray, I never got to testify in that case either, because it would destroy their integrity of their entire case.
There was one more
allegations
case.
they were making,
There is one more case that this is really necessary to add. It's still open. There's a judge in Missouri. His name is Masson, and he's refused to let the FBI lie. The lawyer, Ty, what's his last name?
Clevenger.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Clevenger has been pursuing this for about 9 years. Okay. And what he's just saying is, look, the FBI took Seth Rich's computer, personal one, and his office computer. Why'd they do that? This was a simple murder, right? This was a robbery gone awry. Why did this FBI supersede the district police and do that? And what are the results? And first, the FBI said, we have nothing on Seth Rich and nothing and on Seth Rich and our computers. And Ty said, well, wait a second now. He asked the judge to look at, oh, yeah, we have 800,000 records. We can't possibly put them in order. It would take a couple of years. And then finally, the judge says, look, stop with this business. We want you to give a real answer to this case. And so this judge is being like a judge should be. And the bottom line is the FBI lied first about having no records. Then they said, oh, I have too many records to put in. And the thing is still up and running. And there's a slight chance that with Kash Patel, head of the FBI now, who knows where all the bodies are buried, okay, that he will summon up his testosterone and make sure that Judge Masson makes, that the FBI complies with what Judge Masson has been pleading with them for over 7 years now, if memory serves. So that's still open. Hope springs eternal. Maybe the judicial system will finally work, even if in just this one case.
There's another possibility here. Let's start it. You want to start a real conspiracy theory?
Yeah, sure.
Look at the timeline between the murder you cited and the WikiLeaks, the releases and the discovery. That's 3 weeks. Now, and supposedly there's an email from Seth Rich to WikiLeaks asking for money for the data. Now, if that's true, NSA has it, and they report that kind of stuff. Anything going to WikiLeaks, they report. So, and this guy's going to sell data to WikiLeaks, they would report that. And that would go out to the intelligence community and the administration, the Democratic administrators. So I'm going back at how long does it take to discover somebody compromising data or illegally releasing classified material, if you will, in the government. I mean, it takes them months or years to discover that, using all the resources of the FBI. I mean, so it took several months before they discovered Thomas Tan did it for the New York Times. So here's this 3-week period. But if NSA got that, it would report it immediately. And so the immediate report would be to people who were affiliated with the DNC and therefore know who internally was leaking it. And so therefore, if it was really true that he was murdered because of that, then these intelligence agencies don't want to be complicit and as an accessory to murder.
And obviously,
and I just to kind of.
It's not uncommon for them to assassinate people. Okay.
Yeah.
go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, it's important to note that those DNC emails were downloaded during the last week of May 2016. You know the precise dates, Bill. What were they? May
23 and 25 May, and also 26 August.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So
which said a second person was involved.
Right.
A second person was involved.
Then Julian Assange announces that he has DNC emails relating to Hillary Clinton. Okay. That was on the 12th of June, 2016. And this fellow, Rich, was murdered on July 10th, 2017. So all I'm saying is that if CrowdStrike or anybody else looked into computers in the DNC at that time, they could easily see, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, who not downloaded, not hacked, but who copied that stuff onto a thumb drive or some other external storage device. Correct, Bill?
They would at least be able to get to the device that did it. Now, if multiple people use that device, they'd have to sort that out after that.
Right.
But NSA would
Okay.
know exactly who did it because the
Right.
names would be in the email.
Okay. So I am going to exonerate you, Bill, from being a conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
I'm going to call you a good detective and an excellent mathematician. And even I can subtract July 12th. No, I guess I can see the weeks that intervene. And, it's so suspicious that the FBI took that computer, didn't allow as though it had it,
Right.
and then lied to the judge, lied to the court, saying they didn't have any records on Seth Rich. And finally, now memory brings back over the last couple of months, the lawyer, Ty Clevenger, has said, look, you didn't look in this group of documents, which you segregated out. And now look there. And they go, oh, yeah, we do have some there, but it's going to take some while for us. Now, the patience of the judge is key here. Is that right?
Let me
Bill?
put it to you this way. If I were in NSA and I was looking at this and I wanted to find all the Seth Rich emails going anywhere in the world, it would take me about 15 seconds to get them. 15 seconds.
Now, Bill, do I recall correctly that was Cy Hirsch under
Yes, you do.
oath saying
Yep.
that? Yeah. Well,
Yep.
Cy Hirsch under oath, they finally got him to do it this deposition. Well, that means something to me. So, Bill, you're not making it up, are you?
Nope.
You don't make stuff
Hirsch
up.
is the source of that. Yeah. Yeah. And he had an FBI source saying that.
Yeah.
A high level FBI source. So,
Yeah.
hey, they've got
So
that.
in my view, this is no longer a conspiracy. It's an unresolved murder.
Yeah, it is. And that's why they're not really pursuing it, in my view, because the intelligence community did it.
If Seth Rich did leak the DNC emails to WikiLeaks, obviously the Podesta emails came later. They were separate, and he was, he had passed away by that point. Who do you think, what actor would have been interested in supplying WikiLeaks with the Podesta emails, and how do you think that worked?
Well, I don't know. There'd probably be any number of people who want to do that. I mean, the evidence there was the last modified times on that file, which came out dated 21st of September. They were all mixed, odd, even ends. So it wasn't a download. We couldn't say it was a download to a thumb drive or anything. It could easily have been a hack, but it still could have been using another format, another code format to do a download. It could still have been that. So, that's really up in the air. There's nothing that I know of that could technically tell me who that was, but NSA, if anybody hacked it and transferred it, NSA knows who did it.
One thing I think it was Craig Murray, someone associated with this whole story, I believe, has floated the thought that if NSA was watching the DNC situation and seeing that this was not a hack, that there may have been a disgruntled member of the intelligence community who may have been aware of that and may have supplied something like the Podesta emails to WikiLeaks, especially because Podesta was being observed under FARA because he was working with foreign countries at that time. So,
well, I mean that could be possible, but I mean also I think his password was password.
Right,
so
that too.
If anybody wanted to hack him, hey, it's not hard.
Pretty sophisticated, I gotta tell you.
Yeah. I mean, it could have used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or something like that.
And coming back to the current news, I'd just like to ask you, because a lot of people like in our chat, etc., are basically of the opinion that there won't be any prosecutions here. What do you all think about that? Do you think there will be any actual prosecution or not of anyone involved?
Well, I think with the Tulsi and Cash, there will be. and Bondi in the DOJ. I think there will be, but I would say 60-40.
Yeah, I'm an amateur at this kind of thing, but I would agree that they'll go forward. They pretty much have to. How far they'll get, whether they survive, call me a conspiracy theorist, but whether they survive physically as well as politically is a real question. This is unique. This is a liminal event, okay? The deep state has been challenged in a way that has never been challenged before. The odds are clearly on the side of the deep state, the more so because most Americans will believe the major media, the legacy media, and we'll just be
The conspiracy media.
because, yeah, right. So, that the media is the key here. I see no indication that the media is about to go to confession, so to speak, or say, oh my God, sorry, we were wrong. They'll fight it tooth and nail. And, the Uber driver that I had yesterday, he served in Congress. And I asked, he was a congressional aide when he was young. And I told him about this. Oh, well, yeah, but I read that all that Tulsi Gabbard stuff is spurious. That no. Well, I read that just yesterday. I said, so who might I believe? I said, well, believe Tulsi Gabbard. Now that's one person, but so many others will say, oh my God, how can you trust Trump and the people that he assembles with him? Everyone has Trump derangement syndrome, okay? And that would be cute if it weren't for the fact that with Biden in office, this almost came to nuclear war with Russia over Ukraine. The American people are brainwashed on the fact that Putin is Hitler incarnate or Satan incarnate, the Russian people as well. And that's a major task. And, I'm just so happy to be part of Consortium News. Bob Perry gave us green light to pursue the facts where they were. And we were the only guys. We were the only guys really early on that would publish things like what Bill wrote on December 2016. So, we're going to keep plugging along. And I hope that Bill is right, 60-40, that they'll go ahead with it. But even then, what kind of jury in New York? Oh, Brennan may be tried in Virginia. Well, what kind of jury is going to let themselves be persuaded by the likes of us opposed to the FBI? Well, no FBI. I don't know. I'm just sort of hoping against hope. And I never expected that business will come out, and to the degree it has, as authoritatively as it has, and with documents. That's what's key.
That's
documents.
the key. That's the key. That documentation is going to be hard to refute. That's also what I brought up with Pompeo, when he was saying, well, the Russians still, they still probably hacked it and all this stuff. And I said, well, if you're going to call this a war, you have to release all this data that you have that shows that they did that. And he said, well, it's classified. I said, well, okay, look back at the Cuban Missile Crisis. When President JFK released the Talon keyhole data showing the missiles in Cuba, right? That was a case where he declassified that because it was a threat of war. So if you're going to call this a war, you need to release it. Also, remember that during the Korean shoot down by the North Koreans or the Russians of that North Korean airline or South Korean airline over Kamchatka or the Sakhalin Island, President Reagan released the Japanese, although we had a better version, he released the Japanese version of the air-to-ground controller ordering the Russian fighter to shoot the plane down. So he released that to show that they really did it. And so he declassified anything that threatened a war. So if you're going to say that about this Russia gate, release the data like they did. There's a precedent for it. He didn't. He shut up and never did anything. after that, I mean, he had no other argument. Okay. The guy was a bureaucrat in my view.
Bill, explain how it happened that the president directed Pompeo, then head of the CIA, to bring you in and ask you why you said these unusual things. How did it go? How did it start? Just give us a real thumbnail sketch.
Okay, I was in Amsterdam trying to get a business going, and my wife gave me a short message saying CIA had called. They want you to come in and talk to the director. So I'm there on the phone from the Netherlands saying I'm here for the end of the month, then I'll be back. And after that, I can have an appointment with you, because when I called, I answered, his executive secretary took the phone and said, the director would like to talk to you about, some of the things you're saying about Russiagate. And I said, well, I can't do it this month. I have to, when I finish my job here in the Netherlands. I was in the Netherlands because the FBI, CIA, and NSA shut me down everywhere I tried to get a job inside the United States. They literally did that. And we had evidence of that, but no one would testify against the government because that's a felony, right? They interfere with the pursuit of happiness of individuals is a felony. It's a violation of the Constitution of it. But at any rate, I couldn't get a lawyer up there. So I was over there and they told me, okay, here's a date, pick a date in November. And I said, okay, 17 or whatever it was, 17th of November, I think, something like that.
Right.
And so I came back and then went down there. I took one of my friends came with me from the company we were forming in the Netherlands and took me in there. He was an American citizen, so he could push me up in a wheelchair to the 7th floor there in CIA. And I went up there and got in there, and he was there with two of his supposed experts who couldn't say a damn word except, how did you figure that out? Well, it was pretty simple, everything was timestamped. Timestamps are there, numbers of characters are there. You separate the time. If the time it takes to send that many characters, that gives you the rate of time transfer. And I said we tried it internationally from Serbia, from the Netherlands, from England, and we couldn't get it any faster than 1/4 the maximum speed. But it was like just about 60% of the slowest speed of that transfer, a goose or two. So that was a fake. And I told him at the time that the CIA and everybody in the intelligence community was lying to him and the president. And if you didn't believe me, go look at DOD IG report 05-03, or 05-3, the 2005, the third report. And it lists out all the lies. Even the investigators found it that they were lied to when the NSA gave them data, they modified it and gave them a modified version of what the original was. The difference is we had Tom Drake internally and gave them the original. So when they got their report from the NSA, they could match it and say, you guys modified this to make you look good. Okay. So they were lying to the IG internally. So that's what they do. They just lie internally, even amongst themselves. And I was trying to get that across to Pompeo and the president. You can't trust these guys. The way to do it, get back to the network logs. These people cannot lie. Once that, you'll figure out everything they're doing by those logs, and they can't lie to you.
Two little color things to add here. One is, if I recall, you're telling me, Bill, Pompeo said first thing, look, the only reason I want to talk to you is because the president, for some reason, directed me to. Okay.
Yep.
And was there any evidence that he reported back to the president what you told him?
No,
Zero.
in fact, he
okay.
said in fact, he solicited me to go talk to NSA and FBI, and I said, sure. I won't help them. I will not help them subvert the Constitution, which is what they're doing now.
And when it became known that you had this tete-a-tete with Pompeo, you were asked to have an interview with James Risen and a guy named Duncan Campbell, who was pushing the party line on Russiagate. And the first question that James Risen asked you was, who did you vote for? And what did you say?
Oh, I voted for Trump.
Yeah, okay. So here's a supposedly objective investigator or journalist trying to get a story out of Bill. The first thing he does is prejudice Bill into saying, "Oh, he's a Trumpist." Okay, take the rest of what he says for nothing. Okay,
Yep.
So those are little color things that matter. That's the press, and that's that's Pompeo.
But
And
as
yeah, of
time has
course they
shown,
knew.
yeah,
Yeah.
but as time has
Yeah.
shown, I mean, the one telling the truth was you, me, and CN Consumers Consortium News, and everybody else was pushing a conspiracy theory. All of them, everybody.
Yeah, and the thing is, the challenge before us, and Joe, thanks very much for holding this thing. The challenge before us is I mean, we have to be smart enough to figure out how to break into what Americans really hear and read and see. I mean, I've always said that the fault may not be in our stores, but in ourselves. We're real smart people. Can't we figure out a way to break in? Now,
Yes.
I say that and saying that I only have 10 more minutes here. I have to take care of something here, but I'm happy to be around for 10 more minutes.
Well, yeah, and Joe, I think you published it just recently, the way to solve this, to get all the criminality out of government and also discover the criminality worldwide, doing the analysis that deductive, inductive, and abductive analysis of the data that NSA, CIA, FBI, and other agencies, IRS, all of them have, as well as looking at the network logs, finding out internally in the government if anybody was playing games against that data. You know, so all that is in that article that Joe, you just recently published from us, from Ray and I.
Right.
We both said it, and you know the answer is there as to how to fix the government and make it permanently fixed. That is, you have a process running that assumes you're going to have EPO creep into the top of the business, and it will try to influence and illegally or criminally use the system. That can be done and can be inculcated into code that'll run automatically. And if anybody tries anything, the whistle will be blowing immediately in many different areas. And so they can't stop the alerting. That's the one thing that would keep it, ensure some permanence to this, even after the Trump administration leaves. You know, and if you get another Democrat administration in, will they start the same corruption and the same evil again? If they did, and you built that in, they would be exposed immediately. Like I say, if they'd done what I had proposed in 1992, Ed Snowden couldn't have downloaded that without being discovered immediately. When he did a massive download like that, it would have been immediate understanding and recognition by the system that he was doing it.
Well, I'm glad it didn't happen. Let's try to use this last Ray. Elizabeth, do you have any more for Ray? Because I have a series of questions for Ray.
You go ahead.
All right, and then we can pick up with Bill. Can you stay a little longer, Bill?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So Ray, here, I'll give you a quick succession. Please answer these. One, I brought this up with you, and I understand from a political point of view, it's really important that Russia is not blamed. Because, and I want to know, how much do you think Russiagate fed into the current crisis between U.S.-Russian relations, particularly what happened in Ukraine, what's going on right now? But I often argued that from a journalistic point of view, it doesn't matter even if Russia did do the hacking. I'm not saying they did, because there's no evidence that there is. But let's say Russia did hack it. That information that they hacked and gave to, would have hacked had they done that, and gave to WikiLeaks is true. It's true information. The head of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and 4 or 5 other DNC top officials resigned right after WikiLeaks released it. Why? Nobody has ever refuted that any of those emails were fake, were fabricated, were wrong. It was true information. In other words, Russia, if Russia did it, I'm not saying they did, they put true information into the electoral news cycle about the Hillary Clinton campaign. But yet we labor under this illusion of the mainstream media that this was disinformation, that Russia put disinformation into it. What they put from a journalistic point of view, it doesn't matter who hacked, who leaked, who did it, whether it was Seth Rich, whether it was Russia. The documents are true. You only care about motive when you're doing an oral interview with someone. You can't back it up. What is their motive? If you have the documents and you can verify them, which WikiLeaks did, it doesn't matter who gave them. For example, WikiLeaks has started this anonymous Dropbox that CNN, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, FT, all the big media have copied. They all have these anonymous Dropboxes, so anyone could put in there classified information or some kind of secretive, sensitive information, and the journalists at those publications and networks can then verify them without knowing who gave it to them. It doesn't matter who gave it to them. Ray, so I want you to, please, if you can address those two issues, the political ramifications that led to the crisis with Russia right now, and also the issue of whether it matters whether it was Russia or not. Last one, why aren't the Democrats? They never will give up on this story. They cling to it like a life preserver in the high seas. You need a silver bullet to kill them like you did a werewolf, or a crucifix to show them like Dracula, to stop them from believing this. Why is that?
Well, a good question, Joe. The answer is simple in my view. It's the media and Trump derangement syndrome. Russiagate bred a whole generation of people who can't possibly believe anything Trump says and are quite willing to believe that Putin and the Russians are a big threat to us. And so when you came down to Joe Biden, who was even worse than Obama in this regard, you have a whole 80%, I would guess, of Americans who would have thought that if we wanted to put troops in Ukraine, that we should do that because of this Russian menace. In Kuwait, of course, unwarranted, of course, but that's the perception, is what's important here. People have been brainwashed, and my Uber driver yesterday is a case in point. But I read yesterday that that's a bunch of bull. So that's the challenge for us. It's the brainwashing. And just to finish this, I did this duel with a democratically inclined radio host in Texas. I used to talk to him all the time. But how about this? But how about that? Well, the party line from the DNC was over. Then finally he said, "Why do you keep doing this, Mcgovern? Why do you keep doing this?" And I said, well, I guess the simple answer is because Russia has nuclear weapons. And he thought for a second and, oh, well, all right. Well, that's the bottom line here. Does Trump want to do a deal with Putin on Ukraine? I may be an outlier, but all the signs I see is that despite all the perfidy, despite all the betrayals, the Russians are really interested in working out the kind of deal which will make them secure and will keep Ukraine out of NATO. They're winning the war. Will Trump make enough flexibility to do a deal before unconditional surrender starts rearing its ugly head? I think he could be, but not if American people are so deranged about Trump that he can still be accused of being in Trump's and Putin's pocket. So, yeah, I hope that's simple enough, and maybe that's oversimplified, but this is really important. And here's the crucible. People have a chance to learn the truth from documents, for God's sake. They don't have to understand what Bill and I say if they don't want to. The documents are there. That's what I told the Uber driver. I said, please read the documents. My brother says, I don't know how to find the documents. You go to the website of the Director of National Intelligence. They're right there, for God's sake. So if people want to do this, they can do it.
For the record, in order to have covered this story the way Consortium News has for the past 9 years and uncover what it did, it really takes nonpartisan journalism. And we are unequivocally nonpartisan. Bob Perry was, I am. All of our writers are. Why? Because we equally dislike both parties. It's very easy to be nonpartisan when you don't, when you're critical, highly critical of both parties. And Bill, I know you said you voted for Trump and all that. We are very critical of Trump. You may not like some of the things we write. We are certainly not. Of course, Bob Perry and the rest of us were accused of carrying water for Trump when we were simply looking at the evidence of what happened. But we have a Democratic media that their careers, their credibility is so tied to this. Matt Taibbi debated Michael Isikoff with this lightweight Chris Cuomo the other day. And I mean, I had to stop watching because it was a cough who we had on our show and how I wasn't prepared for, because he's, as Elizabeth has pointed out, he's so good at sounding authoritative while he's bullshitting everybody. I wanted to put my fist through the screen. I had to shut it off because he so annoyed me. He has no evidence whatsoever, but he makes it sound like that he does. He's wrong about this story, but they cannot admit it because they'd have to all resign. The media cannot. They misled so many people for so long. They built their careers on this story. They cannot admit it's wrong. So they have to trash Tulsi. They have just digging a deeper hole for their own credibility as complete frauds and not journalists. Anyway, that's my soapbox minute there.
Well,
Yeah, let me just add
Joe,
one thing before I leave. I do have to leave. It's not only the mainstream media, it's the alternative media. When I started speaking our truth, veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, I no longer got invited on Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! She went to this, I forget this woman who pretended to know everything about this, who dismissed Bill Binney, and who actually told the FBI about some of the things she had learned as a journalist.
That's Empty Wheel. Empty Wheel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she was really
Marcy
empty.
Wheel.
So, should I ask Amy now? Would you let me on to talk to Empty Wheel, given the documents that are available now? I'm tempted to, but I don't expect to get any response. And that's the real sad. I mean, Common Dreams, Counterpunch, they all shut us down, shut me down. Whereas before, they automatically post us. I got to run here. Thanks so much, Joe, and good to be with you again, Bill.
Excellent,
Yeah,
Ray, to
Ray,
go
thank
over
you,
this
Ethan.
again. It's wonderful.
Happy.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you for being with us. Elizabeth, you wanted to
Well, first I wanted to say, don't undersell the smears against yourself and Consortium News, because it wasn't just Trump they were saying you carried water for. It was also that Consortium News and yourself were purveyors of Russian disinformation. You were put on that infamous list, et cetera, et cetera. We had Taibbi on to talk about that. So I think that really is important to point out that Consortium News was as an outlet really smeared by the mainstream media.
Good
Yeah.
point.
Well, and if I can add, I mean, not even to date have any of the intelligence community agencies or anybody addressed the basic technical facts that we've pointed out. None of them. They have never addressed it, and they haven't because they can't, because it's just simply a fact. Now, the mainstream media did, and Rachel Maddow was one of Mad Cow, she was one of the ones who was out there saying, I'm the conspiracy theorist. No, she, and time has proven, she is the one who's been pushing the conspiracy. I didn't. I simply went with facts. But the only way, as I think you were pointing out, Elizabeth, is that the only way they can deal with it is to try to demonize the opposition, use an ad hominem attack on the person and not look at the evidence or deal with the factual evidence. And that simply says, well, they're pushing a total agenda and they don't care what's true or what isn't. So they're basically, in my view, they're mentally impaired people. They're doing it for the money and for the security or whatever that makes them feel good. And a part of their compatriots in their business, I guess. I don't know. It's their association with the group of people who are involved in what they're doing. They've all accepted this as truth and they're not going to go off it.
Yeah, it's projection one-to-one, because they're state stenographers. So anyone who crosses them who they don't like, they project as stenographers of the state, a different state, Russia. They can't fathom.
Well, hello,
actual independent.
Hello, everybody. Garland Nixon here. I'm back. I thought that was very important. That's why I watched that myself, and I thought I knew a lot about Russiagate. I thought I understood Russiagate very well, and I did, but this filled in some gaps, and it helped to also understand what some background stuff. We had Bill Binney tell us that he went to Pompeo and talked, and what happened. We got Bill Binney. I mean, it is truly a a wonderful thing to be able to have a man of Bill Binney's background and knowledge, and certainly Ray. We certainly appreciate Ray. We don't want to ever underestimate the value of Ray's knowledge and experience. But of course, we see Ray a lot more. But we see get Bill Binney out there, a guy who just comes clean and says, yeah, I mean, he says he voted for Trump. That's fine. As you know, my opinion is this: you can vote for whoever you want to. This is not about ideology. This is about facts. And Bill Binney is a brilliant man. He comes out with these facts. And what I think what I learned from this, part of what I learned from this is, this is not difficult. This is not rocket science. And that the people who were involved know what the hell was going on. That when people like Ray McGovern and Bill Binney present them with evidence, they reject it. And what's interesting is they also bring out something that I already know, and that is that the court is part of it. That the court system in the United States is corrupt, and that they work in tandem with the intelligence agencies and the government. And it's a tough nut to crack, shall we say. But thank you very much for Bill Binney. Thank you very much for Ray McGovern, and of course Consortium News and the great work they do. It's over at CN Live, and excuse me. And I think it's important that we share this kind of information. So share this on all your social media platforms if you can afford it. Please make a donation on Patreon or buy me a coffee or PayPal or Cash App or something like that. If you can't afford it, I understand it's tough times out here. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks. I'm out.